Hey, welcome to Do Stuff Outdoors. We are in Uwharrie National Forest today. Ultimately, we'll end up on the Uwharrie Trail, but we're starting off on the Dutchmans Creek Trail, named for Dutchmans Creek, which is a first-order tributary to the PD River, which ultimately flows into the Atlantic. It goes through a few name changes and back before it ends up in South Carolina. We're going to take that for a few miles and then meet up with the Uwharrie Trail again, briefly take the Uwharrie for a bit, and then possibly take the Keyauwee Trail, if depending on how everyone's feeling at that point. So anyway, Dutchmans Creek for right now, Uwharrie later, maybe Keyauwee after that. The Uwharrie forest gets its name from the Uwharrie Mountains, and the Uwharrie Mountains get their name, according to legend, from the indigenous people that used to live here, who were believed to have been known as the Uwharrie. I'm not entirely sure what became of the Uwharrie per se. Later, when we get to Keyauwee Trail, we'll talk some about what became of the Keyauwee. A lot of history taking place in this forest and in this general area. I didn't mention it earlier, but there are 10 of us on this hike today. Some familiar faces from the Neusiok Trail that we took back in March, May, I forget. Well, this is still May, so I guess it must have been March. Anyway, that one I didn't finish. My feet fell apart. So I'm hopeful this is not as long. This is going to be maximum of just shy of 15 if we do the route that I've mapped out for us. But depending on how all of us feel collectively, it may be as short as 11, plus or minus a little. So this is kind of nice. There are some dispersed camping sites right next to a creek, stream. Can't quite see it, but it's the one that we just crossed over. We got a fire ring there, some flat spots for tents, some trees where you could hang hammocks. And we're just a couple of miles in from the parking area. Be a nice way just to get away for a little while anyway and spend a day or two just in the forest. And I can't remember the name of this particular stream. I'll link it or put up a lower third after the fact. But later we're going to cross Big Island Creek, I think 3 times. Uwharrie National Forest and this region of North Carolina in general is not exceptionally hilly. There's not a ton of elevation change, but there's not none either. And so this stretch here is an example of that. I believe over the course of today, we're going to cover maybe somewhere between 15 and 1900 feet of elevation change. There is a stretch, it may be farther up ahead, or maybe this, I'm not sure, called Hallucination Hill. And it's about 200 vertical feet of gain over the span of about a quarter mile. And from what I understand, it gets its name because of the, you can hear me huffing now, because of the sense of just endless up over that brief span. But I'm certainly feeling that in my quads, or my glutes, everywhere. Before the 1960s, early 1960s, Uwharrie National Forest was part of what was known as Uwharrie Preserve, or maybe Uwharrie Reservation. I need to double check that. But it, along with the 3 other national forests in North Carolina, were designated such by President Kennedy in the early 60s. The other 3 being Pisgah, Nantahala, and Croatan, which is where we were a month or so ago. Uwharrie is the smallest of those 4. Don't remember if I had mentioned that or not. The forecast has been a little bit all over the place today. Initially it said 98% chance of rain at 9 a.m. That dropped down to 50. But even with that, it was like 2/100ths of an inch or something like that. So even though it's overcast and a little bit wet, it is not the end of the world.
They're trying to turn it into 4 level. They were trying to.
What's going on with some of this stuff?
It's just they're stylish, man. Best we
Pretty
got.
close to those.
Yeah,
Yeah, but that's got a bear paddling a canoe and a moose. Up front.
Yeah. You can't beat the bear and the moose.
I would put the moose up.
We've come to the junction between Dutchmans Creek and the Uwharrie Trail. If we kept going north, we're not going that way. Obviously our vehicles are south of here. But now we're starting the Uwharrie Trail. The Uwharrie Trail got its start, I think in 1975, a scoutmaster came up with the idea. And at that time, it was roughly miles of trail. Since then, and I don't remember the exact date, but the Uwharrie portion was, the southern Uwharrie portion got disconnected from the northern portion, which is now considered the Birkhead Wilderness, the northern portion, and that's another roughly 40 miles of trail, as opposed to this section. We're only going to be on a portion of the Uwharrie Trail. How big a portion is debatable. It depends on whether we continue over Dennis Mountain back to the parking area, or if we backtrack from Dennis Mountain and take the Keyauwee Trail which adds about 3 miles, ultimately still ending up at the parking area. So we've got some decisions to make. You can probably make out patches of light on the trail. So the overcast quality of this morning seems to have burned off, which is welcome. And especially still being under canopy, we're still shaded somewhat. And it is a humid day today, so hopefully it's not going to get too nasty, but not so bad right now. But yeah, do appreciate the splotches of sunlight creeping through the trees. So we're at the junction between the Uwharrie and the Keyauwee Trails. We're gonna stop, have lunch, and we may split up. We may have a handful of people take the long way back to the car or the truck, and the other take the slightly shorter route. So we'll figure that out as we go. So we did end up splitting up. Just slightly under half of us took the Uwharrie Trail, and they're gonna take that all the way back to the parking area. And then the rest of us are taking the Keyauwee Trail, and that adds a couple of miles. The Keyauwee lived north of this area in something of a vulnerable valley, and so sometime after 1701 they moved into Virginia to Fort Christiana, which was founded by Alexander Spotswood, I believe is the name. He was the governor of Virginia. And but by 1714, I think, they left. They traveled south again. They were involved in the Yamasee War. That was something of a pretty big geopolitical conflict that reshaped a lot of things. But toward the end of that, the Keyauwee ultimately joined up with other Siouan-speaking people that ultimately formed the Catawba Nation.
I love beans. GoPro, stop recording.
There's just a cool exposed section of rock. Not very expansive, not very big, but still a neat little break in all the tree cover. And then we're right back into the woods. But again, on a hot day like today, that tree cover is more welcome than not. So we just left the Keyauwee Trail and we're back on the Uwharrie. We got about 2 more miles of this and then we're back to the parking area. So hopefully these 2 miles are relatively not mean to us. I can't remember what the topo lines look like and I'm too afraid to check, so we'll just deal with it as we come. One thing I don't think I've mentioned yet is that in recent years there have been unconfirmed, but there have been sightings of mountain lions, catamounts, cougars, pumas in the Uwharrie National Forest. Now, most likely north of us, maybe more in the Birkhead Wilderness region. But they were more prevalent, you know, again, many years ago, and they were, you know, hunted as pests, you know, for devouring livestock and the like. And it's been a while since they've been sighted regularly, and they're still not. Like I said, it's unconfirmed sightings, but hopefully that does mean that they are starting to repopulate this area. Okay, so the parking lot is in sight. So that concludes this version of the Dutchmans Creek, Uwharrie, and Keyauwee Trails, or Keyauwee Trails. I get the pronunciation wrong. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hope you enjoyed the trip, and I look forward to seeing you next time out.